when I saw that I was at the end of the marathon, I thought either I'm supposed to be so good I'm at the closer, or I'm just, I'm at the end of the day when all the Europeans are done. And so that based on where I am with my emotional sobriety, I could either feel that good or that bad about myself. I'll talk a little bit about that along the way. I do want to just throw some links in the chat. As Patrick mentioned, I help Dr. Alan Berger run workshops and his Thursday night meeting. And so there's some resources there. My experience is not exclusively through Alan, though. I come to emotional sobriety in several different channels, and I'll talk about that a little bit in my story. So I'm Tom. I'm an alcoholic, and I usually leave it at that, depending unless I'm at a specific meeting. I'm an alcoholic right, and I'm an alcoholic and an addict. I'm an alcoholic and a Al-Anon and an ACOA. I've been through almost all of the 12-step groups or close enough. I currently manage my emotional sobriety and emotional well-being through emotional sobriety process, recovery, the emotional sobriety workshops, and AA. Um, I have 35 years in recovery. I will have 36 in February. Valentine's Day is my anniversary. Primarily, I have a problem with alcohol and drugs, but as I mentioned, it just goes out from there. So I came into the program mostly because of drugs and the desire to get out of trouble when a court date came up. But the source of my trouble, as most of us know, started, probably before I was even born, generationally, conditions with, family trauma, and also with our, addictive personalities that got passed along, genetically and all that. So, but really the start of it for me was early childhood, a lot of violence, chaos, and instability in my home. So I grew up in a sense of fear, a sense of lack, a sense of being out of control, even whatever control a kid would have, even what was supposed to provide comfort and stability, that was gone. And so I grew up trying to find things to grasp and control and manage in order to feel at least somewhat, secure. And that doesn't equal success. At least it didn't for me. So, long story short, I went from food and video games and books and fantasy to drugs and alcohol and just escapism, and wound up at age 18 hitting bottom on one of those and going into rehab. And you think getting into recovery at 18 would make this thing a easy, easy peasy, go ahead and just recover and grow up as an adult without drugs or alcohol in my system, and things would work out fine. That was not my story. I spent my first 10 years primarily in Narcotics Anonymous. I did uh, unfortunately didn't have any basis for recovery and step work at that time. So I got to about year five through uh, service work and meetings and fellowship. But the problem was I was in therapy. All these feelings and thoughts and emotions and memories came up, and I suddenly, got overwhelmed by all of that. And I wound up at 5 years in feeling suicidal, much like I did when I was a kid, right? Things were out of my control. All these emotions were driving me, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want to go back to drugs and alcohol. I luckily had a good therapist. She got me some additional help, and I wound up in a place called Karen Foundation here in the United States. They're in Pennsylvania, and they had a 5-day program for it was essentially codependence ACOA. It was a mixed program. Uh, and then from there, I spent a number of years going through the other 12 steps programs like Al-Anon and CODA, ACOA, SLAA, ISA, so I got the whole alphabet going. which really helped stabilize my emotional and mental health and my recovery, and did step work, and things were going pretty well along the way. It wasn't until about 10 years in that I started to go to AA meetings. And what was interesting was, this is how I know this is like a conglomeration of all of my experiences, and that the fact that emotional sobriety can come through many channels is when I heard the AA promises for the first time, about it was about 10 years in, I was amazed because I was able to start checking off those promises without even knowing they existed previously, that the step work, recovery work had done its job and to get me to a place of starting to experience those promises. These are the universal truths that I think come from decades and even millennials of information, of source of truth in terms of spiritual practices and things like stoicism and philosophical teachings that all come together. So I've started to feel this stuff and get experience with emotional sobriety along the way. What really started to do it for me. So I was still, if in the 12 and sorry, the big book in We Agnostics, he talks about the bedevilments, right? We couldn't manage our own lives. We couldn't we didn't have good relationships. I'm paraphrasing here. We had trouble, right, with living life, and so that was me with a decade into the program. I still had these problems. I still didn't know how to manage my emotions. I was still putting demands on other people. I was still outsourcing my happiness. So these were all, things which were, piling up on me again, going through, what I thought was a good recovery program. And a couple of things happened which started to kick off this emotional sobriety journey for me. One was that I found Alan Berger, his talk on emotional sobriety. I had a friend who's in the recovery industry. He had heard Alan speak at a conference, and he brought back a recording. And I go, this guy's onto something. Like, this emotional dependence sounds a lot like, these other programs and bits and pieces. What I found out is, like, I'm basically a recovery thief. I'm stealing from all these different programs and different teachings and stuff, and putting together this set of tools that work for me. So I heard Alan talk. At the same time, I read Thomas Keating's book on the human condition, again, talking about this dependence, this instincts gone astray, and putting too much demand on outside things to work out just right in order for me to be happy. I also had some deep resentments, shocking, uh, towards my mom, my dad, and my abuser. And these were the three that I wouldn't let go. Talk about resentments and the ones we'll take to our grave and things like that. These were the ones that I didn't want to let go of, but all they were doing was poisoning me, right? All they were doing was messing up my current relationships. And I finally decided that I wanted to take the power back, that I wanted to be in control of my own happiness and stop outsourcing it. And so I started using the prayer of St. Francis as a meditation tool to try and turn around my approach to life, right? Bill Wilson talks about putting the cart before the horse, right? And that's exactly what I was doing. I didn't realize that I had to forgive in order to get relief, and it wasn't for them, it was for me. And I had to be of service, not expecting anything in return. I had to put out love in order to feel love. And so I use St. Francis prayer on a regular basis. A couple of tools that were really important to me was when I did my inventory and worked on steps 6 and 7, started looking at my character defects. What I found was, I have them, yes. And they were a little hard to get rid of when I was focusing on them as almost a scorecard or a punitive inventory of who I was as a person. And what I did to help me through that was to, instead of asking for something to be removed, at the time I had this idea, or heard from a teaching that God doesn't, work in negatives. That, so I asked to be, much like the St. Francis prayer, a man of honesty, because I was a liar, right? So instead of saying, God help me from being a liar, I'd say, make me a man of truth, make me a man of service, me a man of love, focusing positively, both as a reinforcement and a way to inspire myself to be better, but also putting those affirmations, putting that energy out in the universe. This is the kind of person I'd like to be. Because at that point, I tried to be a version of myself that was in control of managing, and based on this rule book that I was handed down of old, grudges, about being transactional in my relationships, about being demanding about how I expected the world to be. Um, Step 7 in the 12 and 12 has a line in it where it talks about, we clearly see that we've been making unreasonable demands upon ourselves, upon others, and upon God. And I'll replace God with life, right? Like, I had this idea that I was supposed to be excluded from life's, problems, right? That somehow that I should not get my share, whether it's a bigger share or lesser share than others, didn't matter, it was my share, and that's the only one I cared about, that I should be exempt from these. And that unreasonable demand was something which was holding me up from being happy. Not that I couldn't um, have preferences, not that I couldn't, want good things to happen to myself and those I love, but every time I tried to put that expectation in front, it rarely worked out that way. And what emotional sobriety has taught me is this ability to be content, right? Appreciate what shows up in the moment and accept it for what it is. Tall task for this alcoholic, but it's something that through practice, I've been able to get a good grasp on. The other thing which really helped me, it started around the same time in my teens recovery, after that first couple of years after I started working at St. Francis Prayers, I went to meditation training, and it was actually John Kabat-Zinn's program through one of his people he taught, and that's MBSR, or mindfulness-based stress reduction. And they taught a variety of meditation tools and skills. And that slowing down of you know, my breath, my thoughts, my reactions helped so much, because, my brain was wired for survival, right? That early encoding that, my parents, who had, one job, take care of me, didn't. And so I needed to be in this survival mode and panic mode of, when something was happening, it was a disaster. I got to slow down enough to see when these thoughts and feelings were arising, and I could start to work on disputing them and taking a look and see if, was this real? Was this really happening? Was this a perceived threat or a real threat? And if it's a real threat, how threatening was it? How critical was it? And that process, probably saved my life, because my inability to see the true from the false, to be able to split up what's going on in my fast talking brain versus what's happening in reality, got me in trouble so many times. So, closing that gap to where I can see things and process things a little bit better was a lifesaver, and a path for me for emotional sobriety. So, I know there's a mix of people in here from different programs and different practices. What I'll talk about a little bit Oh, I got 5 minutes left. This is cool. Looking good. Um, you know, if you go look at Bill Wilson's letter on emotional sobriety, he describes it quite a bit. His work in the 12 and 12 again has a lot of the approach to achieving emotional sobriety, and he talks about it being the goal of 12-step work. Again, I work with Alan Berger. He's added some other definitions. For me, it's not about not being disturbed. It's not about not having these distortions. Like the it's about seeing them when they come up. It's the train moves a little bit slower as it's coming at me down the tracks. It's the ability to discern the truth from the false, right? And it's about proportional response, right? Am I responding to the level which life as it is right now, reality, deserves, or am I blowing this out of proportion? Um, Without using spiritual or psychological bypasses, because I use that, I was you could call it, trying to be overly stoic or nihilistic, or use a spiritual bypass and basically say, oh, next life will be much better, whatever it might be. No, it's like, this is my only a chance to live this moment. So stick with it and experience it, good or bad, and then try to respond to a level which is appropriate. Um, so the um, a couple examples I have of how I've been able to put this through. Like I'll use the most recent one right now is this is a really rough holiday season for me and my family. My wife's dad passed away earlier this year, um, and we also lost our dog. And so those are reasons to be sad, right? And miss these people and I'm feeling that, right? When I have a memory and experience and like something comes up, and we talked about last night, I got sad. It's okay to be sad, but that doesn't mean I'm got my head under the pillow and hiding in bed, as a result of what's happening as well, and that we can have joy and sorrow in the same time. Um, a couple other experiences, but like not only that, I had surgery this year. I had a spinal surgery, and I missed a bunch of work. And recently, a few of my coworkers got promoted, and I heard the news, and I'm like, yeah, they deserve it. Yep, they deserve it. They've been working really hard. I don't deserve a promotion this year. I missed a lot of work. My performance has been under my normal performance, but being okay with it. Like I could remember feeling jealous about everything, about everyone. If you were happy, I was jealous that you were happy, right? If you were in a great relationship, it made me feel worse. Um, you know, I'm a I'm a addicted to more. So, even though I was in a good relationship, I wanted your relationship too. You know, so being happy for other people and being see myself clearly, and having humility in this process is just been a real gift. Um, I had another, I got two more stories real quick, and then we'll wrap up. One was the series one is we used to have a small kitchen, but we've had this house for 20 something years, and we had a small kitchen. It was laid out cruddy, and like everything would spill out of the cabinets and all that. And when my wife would try to cook, and we didn't have any counter space, and she'd get upset, and she would express herself being upset, and she would say stuff like, I can't take this, right? And I can't handle this house. And I would react in a panic, and I didn't know why. And it happened several times over several years, and finally I slowed down. Like I would do stuff like I would defend the house, right? It's like, oh, we got too much crap. The cabinets are fine. Or like, or get angry back. What I found out, it was I was just responding from fear about her leaving, because my mom used to say stuff like that. My mom would take off. right? My mom would get in her car when her and my dad would get in an argument and just, disappear. So the emotions that were happening today was a result of something that happened, 30 years ago. It wasn't until I slowed down enough to go, oh, this is my wife having her reaction, and I don't need to react the same way I did when I was a kid, right? She's not going to leave me over Tupperware falling out of the cabinets. But it was this process of just slowing down and realizing this, this demand that she be calm all the time and not be expressive of her frustration or emotions because it disturbed me. That's my demand that I was putting on her, very, very much out of line. She gets to express herself, and I get the chance to respond as I need to in order to take care of myself. Um, and Time's up. I do want to leave time for everyone else to share. So I'll just wrap up with this. I'll leave the other story alone. What emotional sobriety has taught me is, humility, proportion, taking care of myself. You I wrote down a phrase. You know, it's about taking myself seriously enough not to harm other people, and not taking myself so seriously that I harm myself. This is all about balance. I used to call it the B word. you know Balance. It's a tough one, but this is what this program gives me the opportunity to do, is to learn balance and to practice balance, and when I fall off the balance beam, get back on. So I do want to leave time for everyone else to share. I want to thank Patrick and everyone else from the Berlin group for asking me to come in tonight,
Ah.
and thank you very much.